I'm gonna regret this. Hello fellow media lovers, my name is Maya, but you can just call me Mediahead. As the title of this video suggests, I like remakes. Or at least, I like well done remakes. The issue is, most people disagree with me on what a good remake is, especially a certain movie by the name of the 2017 live-action Beauty and the Beast. And during this time of quarantinings, existential crises, and horrible nightmarish events that make me wonder if the end times have come, it's made me wonder about certain existential questions that haunt me in the middle of the night, which clearly includes, why do remakes get so much hate? One thing out of the way, in spite of the clickbaity title over there, I'm not a big fan of every single remake that exists. I also like to see new things come out of Hollywood, and have also become frustrated with its current trend of constantly remaking the same story over and over. But some people seem to have a particular grudge against Disney specifically for, quote, ruining their childhoods. So I wanted to look into that. According to Wikipedia, a remake is a production of a film, television series, video game, or similar form of entertainment that is based upon an earlier production. A remake tells the same story as the original, but uses a different cast and may alter the theme or target audience. Those are my notes, I need those. Basically, a remake is exactly what it says on the tin. You take a thing, and you remake that thing. Though we can probably agree that even with such a vague definition, a remake has to do certain things to be considered a good movie, much less a good remake. So I ended up coming up with 3 different criteria for what a remake should do. 1. A remake should retell the story of the original. If you have the same title of a movie that came before you, but the plot and premise is completely different, that's not a remake. That's gem in the holograms. 2. Bring something new to the table. For the sake of keeping things interesting, this criteria is basically a must. If it doesn't have something at least a little bit different, then why the hell are we not watching the original? And 3. Respect, but not necessarily cater to, the original audience and the movie itself. While no one wants to see the same movie twice in a row, no one wants to see a movie make fun of the audience of the same movie it shares a name with either. That's just a dick move. So with our 3 criteria in mind, let's talk about the Beauty and the Beast remake. We can all probably agree that it retells the story of the 1991 animated film. The beautiful and intelligent Belle lives in a simplistic, anti-intellectual French village and comes across and falls in love with a beast who was cursed by an enchantress years ago for being a vain asshole. Or for being a 10-year-old who had learned the importance of stranger danger, one or the other. So that criteria, no one's gonna argue that, let's move on. Bringing something new to the table. For the sake of keeping things interesting, Beauty and the Beast 2017 actually does quite a few things differently. The first thing that they bring to the table is that Magic Atlas book thing, which, even I'll agree, despite loving this movie, was terrible. It does nothing for the story. I don't even understand the Belle's mom little plotline. Like, I think it was supposed to bring Belle and the Beast together, but it just kind of gets left by the wayside. But they tried, and sometimes that's all you can hope for. But getting to the changes I actually did like, the biggest one was Gaston's characterization. In the original film, Gaston was just kind of what TV tropes likes to call a boisterous bruiser. This big dude with a pretty face and chiseled jawline who's really just there to be a misogynistic idiot. If it weren't for the fact that he literally stabs one of our protagonists, I wouldn't even consider him that threatening, much less a major antagonist outside of the Enchantress herself. Hell, Gaston is so damn pretty that he even has a small group of fangirls who actively keep on saying that he was in the right and the Beast was in the wrong. The 2017 remake lives to shut those people the hell up. The movie's 3 years old by this point, so I'm sure at least some of you have seen the argument that 2017 Gaston is more of a sociopath than just a misogynistic man-baby. He longs for the days of his youth when he was a soldier and was burning down towns and murdering everyone in sight like he was part of the Spanish Inquisition. His totally sane reaction to being rejected by Maurice as his hypothetical son-in-law was to knock him out and tie him in the woods to be eaten by wolves so that Belle would have no choice but to marry him. And I'm not sure if this is confirmed or not, but considering the line that calms him down about thinking about all the widows during the war, I'm pretty sure the movie straight up suggests that Gaston is a rapist. This basically eliminates anyone who could possibly see Gaston as the good guy and the Beast as the bad guy. At the end of the day, I love to hate a good villain, and Gaston from 2017, in my opinion, is far better than his anime counterpart. The 2017 remake also raises the stakes of the last petal falling. The 1991 stakes were already pretty high. The last petal falls, and the Beast is a beast forever, and the staff are living objects forever. And it's even suggested that forever means that they all become immortal and have to live with this fate till the end of time. The 2017 remake, however, is a bit more sadistic to our protagonists. With each fallen petal, the staff becomes more and more inanimate, and when that last petal falls, as we see, they become objects forever. On that note, let's get into the next change they make, which is the ending. We get to see those stakes actually come to fruition in the ending of this remake. Back when this movie was in theaters, I went to go see it with one of my friends who, just disclaimer, has a habit of laughing no matter what emotion she's feeling. And we watched this in theaters. Keep in mind, both of us have seen the original countless times. And when that scene hit where all of the staff turned into inanimate objects, she let out this unnerving laugh of pure sorrow that I have never heard from her and have not heard since. Meanwhile, I was just kind of sitting there like, what just happened? What? Because it's a flippin' Disney movie. Even if you know that it's going to be reversed in 60 seconds, it doesn't matter. You're watching all the horrible things happen, so you're in shock. Oh, and this also includes another little change to the story that I also very strongly appreciated, as did anyone who did the math and realized that the original prince was 10 years old. Because it seems like the remake decided to take a page out of Beastly's book and decided to just straight up make the Enchantress an absolute bitch who was wrong to enchant everyone in the first place. I shouldn't have thrown that. The Enchantress just straight up seems to realize that maybe cursing the heir to a throne in this little kingdom here is a terrible idea, especially when you've decided to also curse the staff who has family that is seen in this movie. And she reverses it, so happily ever after. And the final thing I noticed in the remake that was changed from the original that will get me in trouble if my blood sacrifice goes through to the old gods and this video actually gains traction is the apparent wokeness in the film. Now hear me out. I am in no denial that the reason that Disney added as much wokeness they did in the script for this movie was to pretend that they're not the exact same company that decided to advertise a gay character only to show them dancing with the true LGBTQ icon in this movie for 1 second. But my opinion on the matter is simple. If the wokeness drives your story forward, I don't give a flying fuck. I want you to think about the 91 film for a second and think of all the reasons that Belle wants to get out of this town in the first place.
I want much more than this provincial life.
And that's honestly as simple as a reason as you can get, and a perfectly fine one. But by adding that extra bit of misogyny in the 2017 remake, Belle's being given a bigger reason to want to get out of this town as fast as physically possible. I actually noticed while watching the 91 film that Gaston says a particular line about how the entire town is against women specifically being taught how to read. The issue is that this line is never explored in any capacity, and it almost feels like Gaston is lying, which it honestly doesn't come across as. It comes across as Gaston telling Belle the actual genuine opinions of the townspeople, but the movie just forgetting to show any of that outside of the song Belle. And yes, in a musical, dialogue is constantly replaced by song if it helps move its story forward in a very thoughtful way. But you still have to show examples in action there, buddy. I mean, yeah, if you told me that the 91 town was sexist, I'd shrug my shoulders and say, yeah, obviously, it's being run by Gaston. But by adding scenes like Belle making a washing machine just so she can get more reading done, it shows her closeness with her father as well as how anti-intellectual the town really is, as the townspeople grow hostile and destroy the washing machine in order to preserve their sense of stability in the town. Now Belle has an even stronger reason for wanting to leave than because this is a Disney Renaissance movie. So regardless of whether or not they add the wokeness just to try to appeal to younger audiences, it helps the plot, it helps the characterization, so I don't give a shit. Finally, heading over to our third criteria for making a remake, respecting the original audience and the film. I'd argue that in certain ways, yes it does. For one thing, it's a Disney movie remaking a Disney movie. They straight up own the notes about every single little bit of symbolism from the original. And you can tell that a lot of care was being put into making at the very least the character designs for the staff alone. They realized that they couldn't just recreate the animated version, so they took time and effort to make these ornate designs for every single character, who is also an object. I mean, just look at Cogsworth. Look at that! Just freaking look at that! And someone on the team seems to have either grown up listening to or straight up being that kid who complained about every single tiny thing that was wrong with the original. The 10-year debacle is removed. The reason why no one remembers their nobility is explained away. They acknowledge the Stockholm Syndrome thing with a simple line from Belle talking about how she can never truly be happy as long as she's technically there against her will. And as I mentioned earlier, turning Gaston into a bigger bastard so that no one could ever justify his existence ever again. They didn't have to do that. They just kinda did. So, looking at these points, why does everyone hate the original? Especially when so many remakes have been done that haven't gotten that same amount of criticism. Well, before I actually answer that question, we have to give an example as to a remake, or three in this case, that did go on and not be criticized for being remakes. And those three examples are A Star is Born, A Star is Born, and A Star is Born. The OG A Star is Born came out in 1937 and was directed and written by William A. Wellman. The film, in simplest terms, was a deconstruction and call-out of Hollywood culture at the time. After its success, as I said, it got remade 3 separate times, within about 20 years of each other. The 1954 version of A Star is Born immediately separates itself from its original by being a musical. Yep, that trend is a lot older than you thought it was. Does it retell the story of the original? Definitely. It follows essentially the same beats, even if it looks at them a bit differently. In the original, our female lead Esther runs into Norman Maine just by being a waitress while trying to get money and show herself off and get some networking done. In the 54 musical, it's rather different. Esther is giving a performance on stage and Norman stumbles onto the stage blinding drunk, and Esther has to pretend he's part of the performance and dance and sing with him. Number 2, bring something new to the table. It's a friggin' musical. There's really nothing stronger you can do to a story than change its genre entirely. Also, Norman's just kind of a dick for like the first half of the movie.
Listen to me.
I love you. I will
just
not
try everything I touch. I always have.
No.
Forget me. I'm a bad lot. You come too late.
And number 3, respecting the original audience and the film itself. While I can't speak much for the audience as I wasn't alive during the 50s, thank God, I can probably argue that it wasn't that respectful to its original source material. The original film is all about how Hollywood can strip away your very identity to the point of even driving you to suicide, such as Norman Maine. But the 1954 musical seems to want to be more of a spectacle than a critique. Esther's rise to fame and even being forced to take a new name, Vicky Lester, was seen less as this stripping away of her identity and more romanticized and seen as purely a good thing, while Norman Maine's descent into depression and even more alcoholism was seen more as a side effect as opposed to being caused by Hollywood culture. And even if they didn't try to disrespect the source material, they certainly disrespected the director of this film. George Cukor's original running time for this film was 196 minutes long, but Warner Brothers, fearing that less people would come to a theater and sit down and watch for that long, cut it down to a general running time of 154 minutes, cutting out 2 numbers and a whole bunch of dramatic scenes, one of which I'm pretty sure was the honeymoon scene that exists in every film except for this one. George Cukor described the final project as very painful to watch, and even after all these years, and after an attempt at restoring the original film in the 80s, about 10 minutes of the film are just lost forever. But let's not worry about that, let's jump right into the 1976 film and pray to God I can get through this as fast as possible, because I freaking hate this film. Number 1, retell the story of the original. I mean, if you were to tell the bare bones of the A Star is Born story, then technically it retells the story of the original. Esther and John in this scenario do meet up, they have a meet cute, he helps her get into the business, she gets really famous while he's losing credibility. Oh, and he's an alcoholic and at the end of the film he dies. But how we get to all those steps is dramatically different from the original and the 54 musical in ways that I'd argue are just painful to watch. And very, very 70s. Number 2, bring something new to the table. My god, yes they did. There's an entire block of text review on Letterboxd talking about how bad this movie is, and it's mine. While Norman could be a bit of a pain when he was drunk and clearly depressed and jealous of Esther for her fame, he never let it get the best of him to a degree that would completely destroy their marriage. John Norman Howard meets a journalist who wants to get a word with Esther about her oncoming fame, and despite being suggested to be sober at the time, gets into bed with her. Actually, John throughout the film is just a pain in the ass to watch. He destroys everything in sight, he's a nuisance to basically everyone, including his friends. Now, I was initially upset that there wasn't a scene where John thinks that he is going to ruin Esther's life if they remain together, so he offs himself, but looking back at the film, I'm pretty sure that that would never happen between either of these characters. And number 3, does this film respect the original? Can we just talk about the 2018 film now? I'm gonna talk about the 2018 film now. Number 1, retelling the story of the original. Brandon Cooper, you are a gift to this earth! I am convinced that Brandon Cooper was a fan of the 70s version, then he watched the 30s version, realized that the 70s version sucked, but still had a warm place for it in his heart, and just decided to smooch those 2 versions and also the 50s version together into one big ball of 2018 awesomeness. All 3 films can be seen in the 2018 film. Number 2, bringing something new to the table. The 2018 film not only mentions the sentimentality that you'll get from producers and journalists towards celebrities, but also that sentimentality that fans have towards a certain celebrity, and treating them basically like an object that is only used for pleasure and entertainment. On their first kinda sorta date, Jack and Allie run into 2 separate instances where someone wants a picture with Jack and do not care if he's uncomfortable with the situation. And they straight up call out how this is creepy and wrong. They also take the character, the press agent Matt Libby from the 30s and 50s version, and turn him into a decomposite character. A strong relationship that is extremely damaged with our main male lead goes into Bobby Maine, Jack's brother, and the side of him that thinks our male lead is a walking liability goes to Rez, Allie's personal agent. That's also known as the side that indirectly leads to Maine's suicide. The 2018 version also brings something new to the table by giving our male lead a backstory and a reason behind his alcoholism. In the original, Norman's alcoholism just kind of exists. Nowadays, we'd assume that it was his way of diagnosing his own depression, but back then that probably wasn't the intention unless the director was really ahead of their time. But in this version, Jack does have a reason behind his depressive thoughts and his alcoholism. A drunk, neglectful father, a history of attempted suicide, a brother who tried to help him but wasn't quite able to get him out of that pit, tinnitus that was just getting worse and worse the more he did the thing he loved. It hurts, man. And number 3, did the 2018 film respect the original and its audience? This film respected everyone, who am I kidding? Like I said, this film takes aspects from every single film before it and just rolls with all of them and turns them into their own. I watched all 4 films for the sake of this one video, and I didn't expect the 2018 version to be my favorite, but it ended up being my absolute favorite, with this close second being the original. So keeping that in mind, why does one film get 3 remakes, 2 of which are quite obviously made just so Warner Brothers can keep the rights to the name, while Disney gets hated for this remake and this remake primarily, outside The Lion King, because come the frick on. Well, let's look over our criteria again. Retelling the story of the original, bringing something new to the table, and respecting but not catering to the original audience and the movie itself. At a glance, these criteria are very simple and easy to follow. You do these 3 things and you've got an at least decent remake. But the issue with these criteria is that all 3 of them are actually fairly subjective. Let's think about this for a second. Retelling the story of the original can mean anything from telling the entire story over again to hitting the same beats. Some people who have seen the 70s film, regardless of whether or not they liked it, might argue with me and say that it did retell the story of the original, just in a slightly different way. Number 2, bring something new to the table. The issue with this criteria is the fact that there's only so much that you can bring that's new before you start overriding point 1. On top of that, what counts as bringing something new to the table? I've seen people, including people I like and respect just here on YouTube, complain that Beauty and the Beast doesn't bring enough to the table and that correcting all the nitpicks isn't enough. So what counts as new for a remake and what counts as too far seems to be a very blurry line that no one can agree on. I think that the 2017 Beauty and the Beast brings just enough new to the table to make it a good remake. But to some people, it just fell flat and is boring as a result by how little it brings. And respecting the audience and the film itself. Oh, God help everyone. Now you have to get into what counts as respect and disrespect. Anyone who's ever had a parent angry at them knows that that is a dangerous line that you don't want to test out. What counts as disrespecting the original source material? I'd argue that disrespecting the audience and the original film is mocking the original audience and the film. If you're remaking a murder mystery that caught everyone off guard and started a mystery trend that became cliche, don't say that the mystery is too simple. If a character had to be completely rewritten to not be a complete prick when you're supposed to like them, maybe don't go too far with the references to how that character used to suck by today's standards. And of course you get to how much you modernize a film before it's disrespectful in a way. One of the reasons why I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy 2018's A Star is Born more than the other films is because when I first saw this film, I unwittingly noticed all the more archaic things that you can't take out of the film without making it lose its Star is Born-ness. I watched the 2018 A Star is Born not knowing it was a remake, and I was unnerved the first time I watched it, seeing Allie, this woman who had come into her own with the help of her boyfriend turned husband, who is just going to give it all up because he needs help. It's made me uncomfortable seeing Allie being willing to give up her whole career when she was at the height of it to take care of her husband and run away from it all. And don't get me wrong, that is a noble thing to do, but showing it in a movie is dangerous. But I think after seeing the same man commit suicide because the world was just that cruel to him 4 times in a row, 3 times in a row, you start having the message sink in a little bit more, you know what I mean? But that's the problem now, isn't it? If Allie doesn't decide to give up her whole career to help out with Jack's mental health, then Jack doesn't feel guilty and feel like the only way to save her is to commit suicide. And without that suicide and without that sense of self-sacrifice, that is not A Star is Born. They literally could not change that part of the film that I viewed on my first viewing as kind of archaic without destroying and disrespecting the original source material. And now do you see the major issue here? Most of the people I spoke to about A Star is Born did not know that it was a remake in 2018. Or they knew it was a remake, but they thought it was a remake of the 70s version. Because I didn't know the other two existed! If we only use these two examples as how to make sure that no one hates your remake, then the only way to make a remake without pissing people off is to make sure that no one knows that your film is a remake. Does anyone remember the A Star Is Born trailers from 2018 mentioning that this film was a remake, outside of like that long thing at the end of every single trailer talking about all the credits? No? Exactly. No one knew this film was a remake of something else. Because, let's face it, a remake's always going to get hate because it's a remake. And what does Wikipedia say about remakes again? A remake tells the same story as the original but uses a different cast and may alter the theme or the target audience. Which means that at the end of the day, when someone decides to remake a movie, they might not even have the original audience in mind. They might want to respect them, but might not want to make the movie for them because they have the original if they want to feel good about it. So why not just use that same story and introduce it to an entirely new demographic who might appreciate it in a different way than the original audience? Sometimes you just get someone who wants to see if they can remake the same movie with new technology because they can, and why not? And to be blunt, sometimes someone just can't appreciate a storyline from another time. A remake is to remake an entire story in a completely new time period, if you're doing it right. I guess if there's going to be anything taken out of this, it's this very simple message. Sometimes someone's going to like a remake more than the original, and you're not going to have a damn clue why. I think the aesthetic of 2017 Beauty and the Beast is gorgeous and elegant, but some people just don't enjoy that, and that's okay. I love the original too. I tore my hair out while watching the 1970s A Star Is Born and couldn't comprehend it when Mom said that a whole bunch of her friends and her were slobbering over Jack, wanting him to be their man. But that's okay, because the remake wasn't made for me. I wasn't even born yet. Is Disney being lazy and just making a giant cash grab while trying to cater to people who are nostalgic for their childhoods, while simultaneously trying to cater towards a younger audience, some of whom I have never seen these films before? Probably yes, but you could also arguably say the same for A Star Is Born, and before anyone says anything, yes, we can look at this film and say that it's a masterpiece, that Bradley Cooper and everyone else who worked on it put a lot of time and energy into making it the perfect remake. But they also had 3 different sources of material to draw from in order to make it not look like a rehash. So I guess the message of the story is this: don't be a dick to people who like remakes, especially if they have seen the original and just like the remake more. So enjoy your remakes or the original, even if other people say that one or the other is trash. It's not hurting anyone, usually. And acknowledging that I probably didn't change that many opinions about the live-action remake of The Beauty and the Beast, I must now say adieu on this fine afternoon, I think. I'll see you in a bit, media lovers.